My dad was a toolmaker for AC Delco. He was a machinist. And I remember going to his shop and seeing his work area and being amazed by the beauty of machined metals. He had these metal cubes and blocks. I think they're called setup blocks. And they were drilled with all of these holes and just beautifully machined and polished. And I just always thought that they were beautiful. And looking back, I realized that my dad was a poet. He was a philosopher. He was an artist, and he was a tool maker. And he taught me that a welder can be an artist.
I remember once when I was younger, my dad taking me out into this farmer's field and showing me this piece of equipment that had been out there for years. And him, with great excitement, pointing out to me all of the various shades and hues of brown and the warm, velvety texture. I also remember thinking, it's a rusty piece of broken equipment. Years later, though, I realized that my dad showed me how to look at the world, and that it's a different way of seeing things than a lot of people. A great example of that is on an overcast day. Have you ever noticed that the greens are more lush and vibrant and that all of the colors pop? And it has to do with diffuse light versus direct light and all of those kinds of things. But it's that in that overcast day, there's something beautiful to be seen if you only approach it with the right perspective. And I'm eternally grateful to my father for showing me that. And that story also exemplifies the way that he taught. It wasn't direct. It was by being in the moment with us and by exposing us to situations and then by asking questions. Because of that, the lessons that he taught throughout my life are still unpacking themselves today. My dad passed away in 1985. 2/3 of my life at this point I've lived without him, and yet the lessons that he taught me are still unpacking themselves in my day-to-day life. And I am not exactly sure how he accomplished that. It's something that I've tried to emulate in my own life. You'll have to ask my children if I've been successful at that, and if they're anything like me, wait about 20 years before you ask them.
My dad was ahead of his time. I look around today and a lot of my friends are in that distressed patina of life that happens. The 1970s, my dad, in our town, we had this brick foundry that had been abandoned my whole life. I don't know when it was closed down, but I remember him going in there and dragging out this workbench that was made out of Doug fir timbers, probably full 2-inch by 10-inch planks and full 5-inch by 5-inch legs, and it had been weathered by time, so the grain was raised probably a good 3/8 raised to the grain, and it was just beautiful, beautiful silver gray moving through these charcoals. And he brought it home and put a glass top over it. It was in our house for years, and I wish that I still had it today because it was beautiful. I also want to get this out of the way right now too. My dad was so much cooler than me. When I was a teenager, I was listening to Styx and Foreigner and REO Speedwagon, those bands of my time. My dad's record collection had Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix and John Lee Hooker, Dire Straits and Aaron Copland and Weather Report and Miles Davis. My dad was so much cooler than me. He was gone before having the opportunity to tell him those things. But I can't pick up a piece of wood and work it, or a piece of clay and shape it, or apply a glaze, or work on my kiln without thinking of him. I hope that those that knew him see him in my work. And he got us off the sidewalk. To find great adventures, you have to leave the beaten path. And he did that. He took us into the wild, into northern Michigan, 2 tracks and into the woods, along rivers and lakes, both the popular tourist places, but more impactful, the one of a kind, I don't know how he knew where they were places. I have this memory of being someplace in the UP and going down a dirt road that turned into a 1-lane dirt road, that turned into a 2-track, that became a field, and then walking out into the woods, and what seemed like a mile and was probably 100 yards, there's this little creek, maybe 2 to 3 feet wide, but it led to this 40-foot waterfall with this beautiful amphitheater carved out behind it. And I felt like we were the only people in the world that had ever seen it. For anybody that's watching that's not from Michigan, the UP is our Upper Peninsula. And in our state, it's a place that's synonymous with undeveloped, wild, natural. He taught me that we are just a tiny speck in an incredibly vast universe. But also never to forget that that vast universe can be contained within our imagination. And he taught me that just because you grow up, you never have to stop playing. One of my favorite memories from my childhood is my dad built this biplane out of plywood and 2x6, and then he strung a steel cable from a tree in our yard out to a shed in the back, and he would put us in the plane and pull us up the cable and let us go. We were riding a zip line long before they were ever cool. And the last thought that I would like to leave you with is that it was my mom that put in me the belief that I could do anything. It was my dad that tried to show me how.